Hi people, it's Wednesday morning today. Look at that beautiful sunrise behind me. It's awesome. Man, it's good to be alive today. Just so much stuff, good stuff happening around. I know we got stacks of challenges in the world, but man, it's good to be alive and to be able to serve God in these days. But I want to talk to you on the subject of hopelessness. We've done a couple of days on this. And we've said in order to move the mountain of hopelessness, we mustn't look at the problem. We have to look past the problem to the promises of God. And we call that vision, where we look past that which is so ominous in our face, so big, like Goliath was to David. And David got cleverer, not stronger than the giant. Maybe you need to think about that for a moment. Second thing we said is when facing the giants out there and trying to move mountains, just remember that we must never put on somebody else's armor. Don't try and put on something that some technique that the pop psychologists tell you to do. I'm not knocking everything they say, but it's just an armor situation. Worldly wisdom, worldly, stuff that the world would want to tell you in order to restore hopelessness. There might be some glimmer of merit in them, but at the end of the day, it's just somebody else's armor. Find your own armor. Put on the armor of God first of all, and let's address this issue of hopelessness. And so today I want to suggest that in order to move forward through this mountain as we're moving it by faith, Jesus said you can move this mountain if you have faith the grain of a mustard seed. We have to learn not to look back. Oh man, you guys are carrying far too much baggage with you. You're carrying far too much regret and bitterness and anger with you over things that have happened. And because they have happened, those things are outside of your control. And you can only control what you can control. And the only thing you can control right now is you. So be careful where you look. Look to the front. Look to the vision that we spoke about beyond the problem of today that you have fought for so long and become hopeless. Look beyond. Because that's where God would suggest it is. Don't look back. You know, we have that story of Lot's wife in the book of Genesis, where Lot was by the angel said, God has a new vision for you. Don't worry what's going on behind you. It's terrible, it's big and it's ugly. Move on, keep your eyes to the front, keep your eyes on the prize. But Lot's wife couldn't do that. And so in the midst of them trying to move forward, she couldn't look forward for too long before she looked back. And what happened to her? Man, she became a pillar of salt, and it's a picture of bitterness. People who keep looking back become so bitter and twisted, and they become really miserable people. I hope you're not one of those that live in the past with the regrets and the defeats and the disappointments and the disillusionments of the past. For goodness sake, people, it's not doing you any good. You can't fix those things in the past. And how many times have we said this recently? We have to look to the future. So today, I'm really hoping that if the past is dragging you down, you draw a line in the sand and say, that was yesterday. I still have to do some stuff with regard to yesterday, but right now, my focus is forward. I will not become bitter and twisted like Lot's wife as I keep gloating on the past. Paul puts it beautifully, and he lines it to an athlete, and he says any athlete that's wanting to run a race will not arrive at the race with baggage. You don't arrive I've never seen anybody at the Olympic Games arriving with a knapsack behind their back to run, to run the race. No. They get rid of all that stuff. They're running light, and baggage is going to weigh you down. So don't look back. Don't look back at all to the past. You cannot. Now, you say, if I'm going to look to the future, what do I look at? Well, there's a beautiful verse that speaks about the imitation of Christ. If you want to know what Jesus wants you to be like, then you need to look at Jesus. And we talk about the imitation of Christ, where we look at Jesus and say, how would Jesus respond right now? I know it sounds simplistic, but I've referred to you before that little book. It was written many years ago called What Would Jesus Do? It's called In His Steps. And it speaks about asking yourself the question at every decision you have to make, hey, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do if he was confronted with this challenge? What would Jesus do if he had this amount of money? What would Jesus do if he had this talent? What would Jesus do if he was facing this particular temptation? Ask yourself that question. It's not a perfect theology, but I've got to tell you, it's a pretty good one. It's practical. And live your life asking yourself every day, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? That's where that little bangle comes from that these kids wear. It comes from that book, In His Steps, asking the question, what would Jesus do? And as days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, you begin to look back and you say, you know, those mountains that looked so big to me before, they're not so big anymore. They're getting smaller because day by day, chipping away at those mountains by just living and imitating Christ. Now that's a good thing to do. It's a practical thing to do. So start asking yourself the questions every day as you get up. Imagine yourself being like Jesus, or Jesus being in your shoes. Imagine painting a picture of how would Jesus behave if he had my boss. Oh, my boss is a cantankerous old goat, you know. Well, how would Jesus behave if he had your boss? How would Jesus behave if he had your financial challenges? How would he be behaving? How would Jesus behave if he had your family life, if he had your friendship life? What would Jesus look like in your shoes? Or what would you look like if Jesus were in your shoes? When you've got that mental picture, take a snapshot, stick it on your fridge and say, that's what God's will for my life is, for me to be. That's what he wants. Don't worry about what he wants you to do. We'll talk about that sometime. But what is Jesus and how does Jesus want you to be? Imagine Jesus in your shoes. Ask yourself the question of the course of the coming days. What would Jesus do? It's a simple question. And then for goodness sake, just do it. Have a great day. Bye.